Every time markets are pushed far enough, the same thing happens. Not once, not twice, every time. At first, the system expands, rules are relaxed, efficiency improves. And then, slowly, life starts to break. Work becomes unstable, housing turns into speculation, risk moves downward. And eventually, society reacts. Not because people become ideological, but because the system crosses a line. This video explains that moment. The point in history where societies stop adapting and start pushing back. At the beginning, market expansion rarely feels threatening. It often feels like progress. New jobs appear, investment flows in, productivity rises, cities grow, trade accelerates, opportunities seem to multiply. This is the first movement Karl Polanyi described, markets extending their logic deeper into social life. And at first, society adjusts. People accept longer hours, more flexibility, less security, because they believe the sacrifice is temporary, because growth promises reward. But markets do not know when to stop. They respond to incentives, not to human limits. And that is where pressure begins to accumulate. Not suddenly, quietly. Polanyi saw this clearly during the Industrial Revolution. Factories were not trying to destroy families or communities. They were trying to be efficient. Machines were expensive. Idle time was waste. Labor had to adapt to the rhythm of production. So working days stretched, 12 hours, 14 hours, sometimes more. Children worked alongside adults. Injuries were common. Exhaustion became normal. From the market's perspective, this was rational. From the human perspective, it was devastating. What matters is not that suffering existed. Suffering has always existed. What matters is that it became systematic, built into the logic of production. And still, society did not react immediately. People endured. They adapted their lives around the system. This endurance is crucial. Polanyi emphasized that societies tolerate damage for a long time before reacting. They normalize stress. They absorb risk. They adjust expectations, until adaptation becomes impossible. In industrial cities, that breaking point arrived when survival itself was threatened, when injury meant starvation, when childhood disappeared, when life expectancy collapsed. Only then did society push back. Workers organized, strikes erupted, public outrage grew, and eventually, governments intervened. Limits on working hours, restrictions on child labor, basic safety standards. These reforms were not born from abstract ideology. They were emergency responses. Society defending itself. This is the second movement Polanyi described, the counter-movement. Society pushing back against market expansion, not to abolish markets, but to survive them. This pattern did not end with factories. It repeated wherever market logic moved faster than social limits. Consider housing. At first, treating housing as a market works. Investment increases, construction accelerates, cities expand. Growth looks healthy. But over time, priorities shift. Homes become assets. Shelter becomes secondary. Prices rise faster than incomes. People adapt again. They move farther away from work. They spend more of their income on rent. They accept smaller, more precarious living conditions. Until adaptation fails. When families can no longer afford to live where they work. When communities dissolve. When entire generations are locked out of ownership. Pressure builds. This is when society reacts. Rent controls appear. Public housing is expanded. Zoning rules are introduced. These measures are often criticized as market distortions. Polanyi would call them signals, evidence that the system has crossed a social boundary. The same logic applies to money. In periods of financial expansion, credit grows easily. Loans are cheap. Returns look guaranteed. Risk feels distant. People buy homes. Businesses expand. Consumption rises. This feels like prosperity. until trust breaks. In 1929, it did. Banks failed, savings vanished, jobs disappeared almost overnight. People did not react by debating monetary theory. They reacted with fear, and fear demanded protection. Bank regulation, deposit insurance, public intervention in finance. Once again, the counter-movement appeared. Polanyi insisted on a crucial point. These reactions are not optional. Markets do not correct social damage on their own. They require boundaries. And when boundaries are absent, society creates them, one way or another. However, Polanyi also warned that the counter-movement is not always constructive. Its form depends on timing. And this is where the story becomes darker. When protection arrives early enough, societies can rebalance. Markets continue to function, but within limits. Life regains predictability. Work becomes stable again. Housing becomes livable. The future becomes imaginable. This is how welfare states emerged, not from utopian visions, from accumulated pressure, from repeated crises, from the realization that unprotected markets produce instability. But when protection arrives too late, or when it is blocked entirely, society does not stop reacting. It changes how it reacts. Polanyi saw this clearly in the interwar years. After the First World War, democracy expanded across Europe. For the first time, working people had political voice. At the same time, governments tried to preserve strict market discipline. Currencies were tied to gold. Budgets were kept balanced. Social demands were suppressed. Markets were protected. People were not. As unemployment rose and living standards collapsed, voters demanded relief. But governments claimed their hands were tied. Markets demanded discipline. Confidence had to be restored. Democracy existed, but it could not respond. When democratic channels failed to deliver protection, frustration turned into desperation. People did not suddenly reject democracy. They lost faith in its ability to protect them. They wanted order, stability, predictability, and they were willing to trade freedom for it. This is how authoritarian movements gained support. They promised protection, jobs, order, security. They did not abolish markets, they subordinated society. Polanyi's insight here is deeply unsettling. When societies are denied protection through democratic means, they may accept protection through authoritarian ones. This is why Polanyi rejected the idea that fascism was an accident. He saw it as a systemic outcome, a society pushed beyond its limits, choosing survival over liberty. The double movement is not a moral story. It is a structural one. Markets expand, societies react. The form of that reaction depends on whether balance is restored or denied. Now bring this logic to the present. Markets today are faster and more global than ever. Capital moves instantly. Supply chains span continents. Financial reactions happen in seconds. Social adjustment is slower. Politics debates, elections take time. Consensus is fragile. The gap widens. People feel this in their daily lives. Jobs become temporary. Housing becomes uncertain. Healthcare feels conditional. They adapt until they can't. When they push back, they are often dismissed as irrational, as populist, as anti-progress. Polanyi would urge us to listen instead. These reactions are not misunderstandings. They are warnings. Signals that the system is exceeding social limits. The question, Polanyi believed, is never whether society will push back. It always does. The real question is how. Through democratic reform or authoritarian closure? Through balance or force? This is why the double movement matters. It explains why regulation keeps returning, why welfare reappears after crisis, why backlash is never the end of history. Markets alone cannot stabilize societies. They require embedding, limits, human boundaries. Polanyi did not offer a blueprint. He offered a warning. If societies ignore the signals, if they deny legitimate protection, the backlash will not be polite. It will be disruptive. And it will come from the need to survive. In the next episode, we reach the final stage of Polanyi's warning. What happens when balance fails completely? When fear replaces negotiation? When order is restored by force? This is the darkest chapter of the double movement, and one we cannot afford to misunderstand.